Welcome to the GreenPilled.network podcast. If you're just joining us, we are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world. This podcast features the people who are doing it, and we publish a season of about 10 episodes every couple months. This season is Lean Mean Capital Allocation Machines. Capital allocation is the process of deciding how to spend or invest money. In what ways can on-chain capital allocation change the way we make these decisions and distribute capital better at scale, more precisely at scale, and without intermediaries at scale? How can we build crypto economic systems that are better than the systems that existed in the old world? What are the coolest experiments? These are the themes of Greenpill Season 4 Lean Mean Capital Allocation Machines. We have a capital allocation machine to show you on this Greenpill episode. This episode is all about conviction voting, which is a powerful primitive for doing capital allocation by staking your tokens on a cause that you have conviction on, grows over time until you can finally release funds from a DAO's treasury. So that is conviction voting. My guests today to talk about conviction voting are Paul Glavin and Felipe Rocha of OneHive. OneHive is a DAO that funds public goods, and they are working on a tool called Gardens, which is basically gardens.fund, which is a conviction voting public goods funding tool. So Paul is a DAO contributor, a public goods maxi since 2019, founding team member and project manager at Gardens, contributing past or present to OneHive, HoneySwap, Panvala, BrightID, and Giveth. He lives somewhere in between the aspirational theories brewed by PhD brainiacs in crypto and the trench warfare of those systems in practice. Paul cares about innovations in governance that can harness the wisdom of crowds and innovations in money that can better measure and reward actual value. Felipe comes to us with more than 23 years of development experience. He has been working with Solidity and smart contract security. He fell in love with governance when he studied and became a facilitator of sociocracy, dragon dreaming, and Theory U. Felipe has contributed to OneHive for 3 years and has been actively leading the Gardens developer team for 6 months. Okay, so this episode is about Gardens.fund, which is a coordination tool for communities with shared treasuries to fund common goods, part of the OneHive ecosystem. And I think that you're going to enjoy this episode about capital allocation with Paul and Felipe. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome, gentlemen. How you doing?
Very good. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. Maybe we'll start off with some quick intros. Paul, you first, then we'll go to Felipe.
Yeah, I'm Paul. I'm a full-time DAO contributor. I've been in the public goods funding space of crypto for 4 years. Currently project manager at Gardens. I've been with Gardens specifically for 3 years since we launched, and have also contributed in other projects around OneHive, HoneySwap, Giveth, BrightID. So I'm very much in the public goods experimentation sector of crypto.
Thanks. Felipe?
Nice. I'm Felipe. I have been developing and in various technologies since my 10 years old. I think it's 24 years programming right now. And I am in the Web3 space for the last 3 years. And I started with the OneHive and contributing with the Gardens, Celeste, and Quest, and the others products. I got in love with the governance when I know dragon dreaming, sociocracy, and social techs. And then when I found Gardens, I see the opportunity to merge that social tech with the real tech, let's say, to provide a way to decision making. I think it's that.
Thanks, Felipe. Well, I want to dive in on conviction voting to start, because that's the application that we're here to talk about. Tell us, what is conviction voting and why is it so powerful?
Yeah, the short answer is that conviction voting is essentially just time-weighted voting. So when you support a proposal, you stake your support and it grows over time. The longer answer is a lot more complex. It's very mathematical. The concept was developed originally by Zargam at Block Science, and it involves a whole host of mathematical concepts that all kind of center around this idea that you can signal support in more rich and secure ways than a lot of the consensus mechanisms that people are working with now. And so there's the implementation of conviction voting that's most popular now was developed from this block science concept by Common Stack and OneHive. And the more intricate piece of it is that you have this entirely on-chain consensus mechanism where anyone can create a proposal. When you create a proposal, the more money that you ask for, the more community support you need for that proposal to pass. All of these proposals are disputable. When it gets disputed, it goes to arbitration. And you essentially have this entire on-chain governance that allows people to signal their support for proposals in more efficient ways. It's probably the easiest way to think of it.
Yeah, so where I place season 4 of GreenPill is all about capital allocation mechanisms. And where I place conviction voting in the suite of the ecology of capital allocation that we're building in this space is that it feels more bottoms up. So anyone conviction vote tokens. And it feels like it's a nice complement to the multi-hundreds of hours of governance debates and processes that have to be done to remove tokens from treasuries now, where you require the whole DAO's attention on something. With conviction voting, I can just take some of my tokens, build conviction over time, and like say I wanted to have a party at ETH Denver and I need a slush fund of $400. That's not worth the whole DAO's attention. I could use conviction voting to do it. Is that close at all?
Yeah, that's a useful way to think about it. And then also like the time weight of your conviction growing is in a lot of ways a security measure. That you have governance systems that are a lot more continuous. You don't have these binary moments of decision making where you kind of demand the entire community's attention. You have ongoing proposals. People get to them in some ways when they get to them, and because your support for proposals is not going to instantly kind of have all of the weight that it will eventually have, you can kind of collectively make decisions that are continuous instead of in these discrete binary, super like administrative, like there's a lot of overhead basically with those governance moments where you need the entire community to pay attention to something and make a collective decision together. And so that's like where a lot of the efficiency comes from.
Seems really powerful. I'd love to talk about this build that y'all are rolling out today. So for the audience, you can go to gardens.fund and play with conviction voting. What did y'all launch today? Why are you proud of it? How does it innovate on existing conviction voting mechanisms? And Felipe, maybe I'll go to you for this one.
The Gardens, the version 2 is different from the version 1 because the main difference is the capacity to have the multiple conviction voters strategies for one community. And the V1 version, we have like one community and it set up one conviction parameter, and then the community all need to agree on that parameter, like half decay, like how much time the proposal need to pass, something like that, and minimum conviction necessary to pass. And now in the V2, you can have one community around one token, and because we build on top of the Allo protocol, we will be able to have multiple communities on top of one token, and then each community can have multiple pools, and each pool have their own CV parameter. So we have more flexibility to get more opinions and diversion of ideas, because conviction, it's powerful to allow you have different ideas, and when we get some conflicts, we don't have the option to say no. You are incentivized to create a new idea, a best idea to meet your needs, or integrate your needs inside the current proposal. And now in the V2, you have that's possibility with CV. More, you can also create a new community around a new token, the same token. For example, OneHive, we have Honey. You can have multiple communities around the same token inside multiple pools with different strategies using CV, Quadratic, and the others. So I think that's the summary for the V2.
Thanks. Yeah, Paul, same question to you. What do you want to say about Gardens.fund, which is what y'all are releasing today?
So to add some context, Gardens was initially launched in 2021. Like, I don't know if you remember back then, but we didn't have L2s. We didn't even have sidechains. It was like a completely different space back then. And the guys that built it really were pioneering a lot of stuff. OneHive built an exchange, a lending protocol. They forked Aragon Court to build Celeste, which is the arbitration protocol. And they were literally building this like from scratch, which was an enormous challenge, an enormous lift. And like understandably, we're still using a lot of these smart contracts and infrastructure. And at this point, they've aged a lot. So a lot of what Gardens V2 is bringing is just like updated infrastructure. We're rebuilding. We're using Allo protocol, which is, in our opinion, like the new current best novel funding mechanism framework. And we're going to launch on much more networks. We'll be on Arbitrum, Optimism, Gnosis Chain, and Polygon. So like there's a lot of improvements that are just kind of overdue for us. But then since we were rebuilding this, we got to rethink a lot of what we don't think is working well about conviction voting. And we have these improvements that we've made. Felipe covered a lot of them. One extra one is that we have point systems now. So in V1, your number of tokens is your voting weight. But we're introducing point systems. There's 4 of them. There's fixed, where every community member has the same voting weight. There's capped, where your tokens are your voting weight up to a limit. And then there's also quadratic, where your voting weight is the square root of the tokens that you hold. And since it's modular, where you can have as many of these instances that you want, you can create many different conviction voting instances, all with custom point systems and parameters, and kind of dedicate them towards specific purposes.
It's really kind of cool to see you all releasing this and updating it for an L2 world. Selfishly, from someone who works at Gitcoin, I'm really excited that you built it on top of Allo protocol. Thank you for speaking nicely about that. I'm wondering, if we take away all the technical details and just abstract it into how does this help people? The median Greenpill audience member is probably a member of a couple DAOs, probably has some tokens in it. What should I use it for? Is there like a good first conviction vote that you think people should be playing with at Gardens.fund now that y'all have released this? Either of you can take that.
So we at OneHive have like our very specific interests of how we want to use this. We want to fund the ecosystem of OneHive and the Honey token. So we want to create a grants CV instance that will fund different ideas and different projects within the OneHive ecosystem. One of the types of conviction voting instances you can create is a simple signaling pool where there's no funding attached, and you can just kind of collectively make a decision using conviction voting. And one of the ways we want to use this is we want to hold continuous elections for our council safe. So the multi-signature wallet that's managing a lot of what's happening in OneHive. We want to have an election where people can support who they think is best representative of the community in that safe, and have it automatically through Zodiac update those signers. And then we want to be able to signal treasury portfolios. One of the big issues that we have in OneHive is we have all these tokens in our treasury, and we want to manage this portfolio. But we're decentralized. OneHive is truly like not a central entity. And so we need to find safe and productive ways of like deciding how we should allocate the different tokens in our portfolio.
One of the things I think is cool about OneHive is that you're using your tools on OneHive themselves. So there's kind of like a loop there that creates it's almost like a reverse Conway's Law. Like Conway's Law is this law that organizations build products that reflect their organization. But since you're using your product to design your organization, there's like an inverse Conway's Law loop there that could create some sort of weird, fun upward spiral of the organization designs the product. So the product designs the organization, and it sort of like spins upwards. But yeah, I think that's cool. I think our listeners may actually not even be familiar with OneHive. So you want to take this opportunity to introduce OneHive and what your mission is and what you all are trying to accomplish?
Felipe, you want to talk about when you first got to OneHive, what you liked about it? And
yeah, I can talk about. I think I'm not the best person to explain the vision of OneHive, but I think what I got in love with OneHive, it's the same concept that conviction vote has. I think conviction voting inspire OneHive to be the community that it's now. It's the way where people it's willing to create every time. I think we are in the environment where people incentivize you create a new strategy or solution for what kind of problem you have. I remember when I get in, I heard about the honey. I get after, I think One Hive has maybe 3 years old, I think, and was not the hype where One Hive had and the honey token. So the community was there and more solidified without a lot of degens and people willing to creating solutions to solve in the Web3 space. And CV is one of them. And the vision One Hive, it's experimenting. I think the word for me One Hive, it's experimenting. We love experimenting new stuff, and to experiment we need to test in ourselves, right? We need to experiment and test ourselves, and then generate products for other people's also solve your problem that we are solving for us.
Yeah, and it kind of like any decentralized community, it kind of just reflects like what the interests of the specific people who are working on it have. And when I first came into One Hive, that was public goods. I saw the framework, and I wanted to know if we can use it to like build roads and like have it be its own self-running public goods funding mechanism. I think One Hive has its decentralization has hurt it at a lot of points in its history, and it has not been clear to people what the vision, what the direction of the community is, which has kind of led me to think of it like less in terms of what it can be in the future and what it's done well at doing already, which is basically to fund infrastructure, Web3 infrastructure. Like One Hive successfully incubated HoneySwap and Agave and Gardens and a lot of these communities that these were on XDAI chain, which never really grew to become anything huge. So that their impact has been limited in that realm. And actually, a funny, interesting story is that when Polygon first launched, they approached HoneySwap and they wanted HoneySwap to launch on Polygon. But the One Hive team at that point said, no, Polygon's not going to go anywhere. We're going to stick with XDAI, and that's where the real growth is going to be. So like within what became Gnosis Chain, One Hive is basically an incubator of Web3 infrastructure. And I think probably the future that's most successful for One Hive is where it's implementing that on other networks and taking what it's learning and doing better at that.
I find the like, I'm always looking for 3 threes between Gitcoin and other public goods DAOs. You were talking about the relationship between Polygon and One Hive. And I just want to take a moment to spotlight the relationship between Gitcoin and One Hive here, both DAOs that have public goods in their ethos. Gitcoin's been traditionally known for quadratic funding, but is now moving to Gitcoin 2.0 and having many mechanisms. One Hive really focused on conviction voting. And one of the things I'm really excited about is that y'all built this on top of Allo protocol, which basically, is a capital allocation protocol. And I think one of the cool things is that Gitcoin can now offer conviction voting to its partners, the people that we already sell retroactive public goods funding and quadratic funding to. And then y'all get distribution for your conviction voting tool by partnering with Gitcoin. So just wanted to highlight the 3 there and just say, I can't speak on behalf of Gitcoin because it's a DAO now, but I'm really excited that the Gitcoin and One Hive are working together. And I'm excited for more people to play with conviction voting as a result of that partnership.
Yeah. Also excited about Allo protocol and like what other funding mechanisms it's going to build, and we want to implement those in Gardens V2.
Yeah. I would say that our final destination in the fullness of time, the way I articulate where Allo protocol could go is we want to do for capital allocation what Open Zeppelin has done for ERC20 tokens, which is you have a suite of well-documented, well-audited contracts that you can just pull off the shelf and pull into your app. So I'd be tickled pink if people could pull quadratic funding or retro PGF or conviction voting out of Allo and build it into their apps. So it's all about cross-pollinating different capital allocation mechanisms to the world. And I want to live in a world where anyone can take the power of conviction voting and build it into their app. Anyone can take the power of Gitcoin grants and build it into their app. So I think it's about empowering the builders to build on this stuff. So these conviction voting contracts are built on the Allo and they're open source and they're available through the Gardens.fund website. Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah.
For the audio listeners, Paul was shaking his head yes.
Yeah, that's spot on.
Cool. Well, If you guys are maximally successful in 10 years, what do you think this looks like? What does One Hive look like? What does the conviction voting ecosystem look like? Paint me a picture of how this scales and affects the world.
Yeah. Step one is Web3 open source software. That's the public good that's most ready to use what we're building. And so the near future is really good open source software that's really well funded with smart, good, hardworking people that are building and maintaining that software. When we get that to work for Web3 open source software, then it should very easily apply to Web2 open source software. And I think that really the only roadblock for that is the UI UX of Web3 as it currently is. But there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to onboard Web2 onto this infrastructure. Within 10 years, that's a good timeline where we should also be applying this outside of the tech space. And we should at least at that point be getting some traction with real world public goods builders, and making something that's easy enough for any community of people to spin up a decentralized gardens community and be able to fund whatever it is that they care about and do a good job at it.
Cool. So I heard Web3 open source, and that'll have a bunch of secondary positive effects. Then Web2 open source, and then the world from there is sort of the order of operations. Be interesting to see in a future in which a local government or an NGO is running a conviction voting funding round for their community. That'll be quite a sight to be seen. Yeah,
it should be sooner than 10 years. I think 5 years is realistic. But
yeah. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to say? Maybe I'll go to Felipe first, and then to you, Paul. Felipe, is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say about this build or conviction voting or what you're up to at One Hive?
No, I don't think so. One thing I want to add, it's about the vision. At least I have. It's the conviction voting. It's a tool that they're gonna promote the change of the mindset of, I don't know the English word for that, but we are as a human don't have the tools before to do decision making collective, right? And we have our 51 majority, and it's too flawless. And then what I think are gonna do happen is CV getting more and more in minds people. Gonna change that behavior because it's more easy to deal with the creative process than the destructive process, you know. So that's something I want to add. I think the CV, it's just a tool that's gonna empower people to self-govern, because I think that's the way we should evolve as human, be more and more self-governed and in our lives, particular lives, and also that's going to impact our jobs, our social environment, and etc.
Love that. Same question to you, Paul. Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say?
We covered a lot. I think one final pitch for public goods. I think that word kind of scares some people in crypto. They associate it with like charity and things that aren't going to make them rich. And I think that it's like could not be more opposite from the truth, where like we have an economic system that already really does a good job at handling private goods. And in my view, I don't really see anything about crypto that improves the organizational structure of a company that coordinates people to create revenue for a private good and create value for the world that way. There are some benefits to crypto access to like securities and equities, where you can give those financial instruments access to the benefits of the financial infrastructure of Web3. But I don't see how companies are going to improve in any way in how they're run with crypto. And the opposite is true for public goods, where it's very obvious to everyone that our governance systems and public goods funding mechanisms in the real world are not working. And part of the problems for that is that we've had an innovation cycle on governance that's defined by centuries. And now all of a sudden we have crypto, and that innovation cycle has decreased to like months. And we have quadratic funding and conviction voting and all these systems that protopia, as you call it, that it's working towards is this system where we're harnessing the wisdom of the crowds, where you can have a collective group of people that are making decisions that are actually better decisions than any of the individuals within that system could make on their own. And then on top of that, you can have this economic innovation where you are actually making money itself work better by acting as a unit of value and a store of value, where money doesn't really work for public goods right now. And we can allocate and have money represent value better by building some of these economic systems in a better way. And like there's no ceiling to the benefit that we get when we're starting to like actually allocate money towards public goods in a way that represents the value that it really provides for the world. So it's like unlimited upward potential.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I'll end on a very pragmatic note, which is that for the listeners, there's a launch today. It's at gardens.fund. You can check out the code that was released and play with conviction voting in your own DAO. So definitely check that out. And then we also have links in the show notes to Paul's Twitter profile, to Gardens DAO, to OneHive, to all the things. So while you're closing down the podcast, please check into the show notes and check out these various apps that have been built. It's really quite cool to see. Paul, Felipe, thanks so much for coming on the GreenPilled podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. We just heard from Paul and Felipe of OneHive's Gardens. I'm excited about conviction voting, and so I'm excited about OneHive and Gardens. I think it's a really cool experiment in capital allocation. Thanks for listening to the GreenPilled.network podcast. Again, we are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers who are using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world. Like Paul, like Felipe, like everyone who's doing conviction voting. While you're here, if you value our work, please go to pods.media and find the episodes from this season and start collecting them as NFTs. Thanks again to JT Nickel, Hal.eth, SimonsSD.eth, ZeroX Lucas, SkyDAO, Sean W. Bren, MMA On Chain, and James.eth for collecting these episodes. Another thing you can do is go to greenpill.network, where you can download the GreenPilled Book for free, become a member of your local greenpill.network chapter, or join the Discord. While you're here, might as well subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps us build the regenerative crypto economic movement by telling the algorithms how much you love GreenPill. All right, thanks for listening. I will see you on the next one.